The one and only Rick Stroud from the Tampa Bay Times. Rick, what's going on, buddy? How are you?
Hey, Jay, I'm doing well. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you, my friend. And you broke the news today. Simeon Rice going into the Buccaneers Ring of Honor. Long overdue, my friend. One of the best pass rushers for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in their franchise history. Just really, really cool to see.
Yeah, he's well deserving. Obviously, there's a lot of guys that are deserving, but he's the first player, I think, in about 3 years or so that has gone into the Ring of Honor. They've had some coaches and whatnot. And, you know, when you look back at those teams when they really started to hum, they had a great defense in '99. They shut down the greatest show on turf. They should have won that game 6-5. And yet they weren't, you know, quite as good until they got Simeon Rice. I talked to Tony Dungy, who said he was really the missing piece to have that edge rusher to go with that push that they had inside with Warren Sapp and Booger McFarland and those guys. And, of course, you know, Derek Brooks. You had 4 Hall of Famers. I think Simeon is a Hall of Fame player, too. If you look at his numbers, 120-something sacks. He averaged better than 10 sacks a year. He did it for a long time. But it's hard to get more than 4 players off a defense that won 1 Super Bowl. And so he's still been kind of on the outside looking in. Yeah, but I'm happy for Sim. He was a character of the game, man. He had his own way of his little sing-song, way of talking and things like that. And just a great athlete and a great player. And so it'll be fun to see him again.
Is there any chance that we'll see anybody else in the Ring of Honor this year, Rick, or is it just going to be him?
No, I think it's just one. You know, the Glazers have been very intentional about how fast they want to put people in, how often they want to, tap into, past times. We've seen Doug Williams go in. We've seen some of the Jimmy Giles and some of the older school guys go in the past. And then, Malcolm Glazer and Bruce Arians, we've seen of late, Monty Kiffin. So there's really a lot of deserving people. And I just think they want to be very, cautious about how fast and how many they put in at once. Look, you still have guys like James Wilder and Warwick Dunn, and I would submit Gerald McCoy, and certainly look at who's on this team right now. Hell, Tom Brady is probably going to be in the Ring of Honor before long, right? So there's still some room on the wall. You can start putting them on the west side as well. So they'll find a way to put all those names up there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And mentioning the pass rush, I was just talking about it before you came on. I think that's one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to in the 2025 season is, I know Todd has all these plans and he has all these crazy schemes, or he's dropping Vita into coverage, and he loves to play. He loves to play that game. But, to get home with 4, to be able to just kind of be like, hey, we're just going to run maybe a little bit of a vanilla defense right here. Go get the quarterback. I mean, what do you see as far as the pass rush here? Because I think it's easy to look at, all right, Haason Reddick. I've said this for years. It's easy to look at the guys you draft and the guys you sign and say, all right, the pass rush should be better. But I look at Yaya Diaby, I look at Chris Braswell. It's always tough to gauge how much better incrementally a guy is going to get from year 1 to year 2 or year 2 or year 3. What gives you optimism or pessimism about this pass rush going into 2025?
Well, look, I think Haason Reddick's going to make really good players out of those other guys. I mean, look, when he was humming, and I still think he has plenty in the tank, what they're betting on, he had that trade to the Jets and he wanted a new contract and he held out. They look at that year as a wash. But before that, Jay, this guy was one of the top pass rushers in the game, and he's motivated, right? Guys are getting $30 million now. He's 30 years old, so he's not the youngest player in the world, but he feels like he still has another contract in him. So he's absolutely going to be something that defenses have to account for. And really, they should be able to have an outside pass rush when you got those 2 guys inside and Cansey and Vita Vea pushing the pocket like that. So I look for Yaya to take a step up. He got a lot of attention last year. He got a lot of chips and a lot of tight ends and guys coming from him in all directions. And that takes an adjustment. But with Reddick on that side, he'll probably get more one-on-one pass rushes. And look, they love the guys that they took in this draft. I mean, they really do. This Walker kid, David Walker, from Central Arkansas, is a special pass rusher. And I know he did it at the lower level. But what you want to see is a guy that dominates at that level, and he did that. I think that, they've got some other guys. I think Elijah Roberts, was a premier pass rusher at SMU. You probably saw him play against the Bulls a few times. Before that, he was in Miami. He stepped it up, and he's got versatility. He can play inside, one of those inside positions on the defensive line, as well as rush. So they've got to get something going with some of those young guys. And Braswell has to improve, right? He has to improve his second year. That's when you're going to see the biggest growth. I thought his last 5 games were his best. He did get some pressures, but it's all about getting sacks. So what also will help that is to have a little bit better coverage on the outside. They work hand in hand. You've got to lock down some receivers for those guys to get home to the quarterback. So, drafting two guys at corner, I think, is going to help them as well.
Yeah, you mentioned those two guys, and I want to ask you about Parrish and Morrison. First about Parrish, I don't know if it stood out to you, but you look at this guy, you're like, all right, not the vertically challenged guy. He just looks like one of those guys that's going to play in the slot. But Todd Bowles kind of pumped the brakes on that a little bit. He's like, no, he's got versatility, and I think that selection and that comment from Todd Bowles, you don't want to read too much into it, but it just feels like he wants to be more versatile on the back end there. So your thoughts on Parrish, and I want to ask you about the pick sixes. We know it's underwear football right now. Right. Any concern about Morrison because of the injury? And I know at this time of year, Rick, anytime we have a conversation about injury, everybody's very optimistic, but I also am very apprehensive of the first thing we want to talk about a rookie player, a guy that's the second round, is injuries. I don't want to have that conversation too much going forward.
Yeah, it usually doesn't work out too well. I mean, that was a risk, and they admitted it was a risk. And it's interesting that you're trying to find a corner to replace a guy in Jamel Dean and the year before Carlton Davis, or guys that couldn't stay on the field. Right. And then you take a chance on a guy like Morrison who couldn't stay on the field. Now, he's had a situation where, the labrum tear in the hip is not a small thing. They think some of that might have to do with his, just the way he grew. He had that happen to him on the other hip in high school. So they're hoping he comes back from that. But there's no question they rolled the dice a little bit here. Now, if they win, they've got themselves a first-round pick. I mean, this guy is a ball hawk. He's everything that Todd Bowles loves. He can play with his back to the football. He can face the quarterback. And the biggest thing is his awareness on the field. He knows where the ball is going to be, and it tends to find him. So he's an outstanding kid. His father played in the NFL with Bowles for a couple of years and with the Washington Redskins. So he's got the pedigree, and he went to Notre Dame. He was a star. It matters to him. So if he can get healthy, but that's a big if with a guy that you take that has an injury flag coming out. Parrish, though, surprised. He opened a lot of eyes, I think, maybe to some of us that were out there. But, we assumed at 5'9", you're going to be competing for the slot, maybe with Christian Izien. And Bowles came out right away and said, no, this guy's an outside corner. He's a starting corner in this league. He can play inside, and we're going to try to cross-train him. But we feel like he's good enough to play out there at 5'9". That's usually a matchup problem. You see corners are longer now and taller because that's what the receivers look like. But this guy had no trouble getting vertical a few times in practice. And, sometimes, Ronnie Barber wasn't the biggest guy in the world. He did play a lot of slot corner, but he also could cover out there. So you just got to put him on the grass and see what you got. But I think they got better. Again, the injury thing is going to matter with Morrison, but there's no question they needed to get better at corner because we saw way too much soft coverage last year, especially when they had injuries.
Too much soft coverage and too many guys that were special teams players playing there, especially the red zone. You're like, oh my God, I don't know who you blame in that situation. I understand. I understand the Emeka Egbuka pick. I understand, a great guy in that spot. And I understand the rationale for Jason Light, and you're just drafting, best player available. But there's still a part of me, Rick, that goes, if Godwin's healthy and Jalen McMillan takes that, your first round draft pick is your wide receiver 4 in week 1 of 2025. And for a team that has deep playoff aspirations, I wonder, are you sacrificing a little bit for the short term for the long term when it comes to that pick?
Yeah, it was an interesting pick. I think they fell in love with the person as much as they did the player. He was just such a clean guy. He made a bit difference in that Ohio State locker room, and the pedigree of those guys coming out of Ohio State at receivers with the Marvin Harrison Jr.'s and others. I mean, Emeka's right there with them, right? A couple of 1,000-yard seasons. He's a precise route runner. He is, for all intents and purposes, Chris Godwin. I mean, he has the same sort of maturity, can play in the slot. And I think this might be as much a tell about Chris Godwin. Now, they say he's hitting all his landmarks, but let's be honest. The guy had his ankle turned around the wrong direction. He's had 2 horrific injuries. We saw that he wasn't the same guy the first year back from the knee injury. Who's to say that he's going to be the Chris Godwin that was leading the NFL with 50 catches when he got hurt? I think what this allows them to do is not rush him back, right? Make sure that you've got him in good shape, and you can play Emeka right away. I mean, he is a plug-and-play guy, and for as much as we talked about Jalen McMillan, who did a great job the last 5 games with the 7 touchdowns, Emeka Egbuka is probably a better player,
Right.
and he may, if it comes down to it, he may be the next guy on the field. But they've absolutely got some depth now. And look, Mike Evans is going to be 32 years old. And he's not getting, guys don't get less injured and more productive as they go along. It took him the last play of the regular season to get his 1,000 yards. So they have to protect themselves for the future as well as right now. When those guys didn't play, when Godwin and Mike Evans were out, they scored points, but they scored about a touchdown less a game, and they were 0-4. And that left an imprint on guys like Todd Bowles saying, hey, it's about scoring points. If we can score 29.5 a game, then we're going to win a lot of games. I'll do some stuff on defense, but you can't be hamstrung because of the receiver position. You got two guys, one's hurt, and one's going to be 32.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Two of the big names when it comes to guys that weren't drafted, but are Shilo Sanders and Des Watson. I mean, you look at those two guys, and to be able to see Des out there, it's one thing to watch him in Florida. It's another thing to see him on TV. It's another thing to be out there like we were last weekend and see him in a land full of giants be the biggest one, right?
Yeah.
What's the realistic possibility, Rick, that either one of these two guys makes the 53?
Yeah, well, I think Shilo has an excellent chance because I think, for one, he's a mature guy. He played 6 years of college football, and let's be honest, his dad was a pretty good player himself and knows how to play defensive back. So I imagine, he's probably absorbed as much about playing that position as a lot of guys back there. Day one, we know he was a great communicator. Todd Bowles called him out for that. That's what you want in your safety. Their job is to make sure everybody knows what they're doing and they're lined up. And the fact that Jordan Whitehead is not back. He had that accident. I don't know what his future is in football, but it's not going to be with the Tampa Bay Bucs. So you have an opportunity. We'll see, what they're going to do as far as, who's going to play opposite Antoine Winfield Jr. But I think Shilo has a chance to make this team. You have to do it on special teams, have to be kind of a depth safety, somebody that can go in there and play when they need him to. And I think he can do that. As far as Desmond goes, realistically, look, you really want to be careful here, right? Because you're talking about a man's life as much as anything. Mm-hmm. I know he played at Florida, and it's hot there and all of that. But at 400 and whatever odd pounds he weighed, it's the NFL is a different animal, right? It's a different pace in practice, different expectations during the week and in games. And so the first thing you have to do is have him commit to a plan, get him under 400 pounds. I would think that they would want at minimum. But there's no question. You watch him move; it's unbelievable what an athlete. You can see the athlete in him, and you feel like that if he were to get himself in good shape and be safe, that he could do a lot of things for you. I mean, it's just hard to move that much of a man. You got him and Vita Vea. I mean, what do you do in a short yardage situation? So I think he has a chance to stick around. I don't know that he'll make the 53 right out of camp. I think he has a lot of work to do, on his body, and they'll get him right for that. But interesting prospect, there's no doubt about it, and just a great kid. I mean, he handled everything with great humor and everything else.
Last Bucs question for me, Rick, before I ask you about some of the personal stuff that you got going on. Linebacker position. I was hoping that there was a guy that they looked at in the draft that could go next to Lavonte David. The chips didn't seem to fall in that. I'm one of the things that stood out to me last year was when they were talking about Servassier Dennis, and they were just like, no, he's out for the year. And they're just, again, you're banking on guys to be healthy that have not shown to be healthy. What would they do without Servassier Dennis? Like that's their hope. Everything is like, hey, look at how well he was able to defend the pass when he was in there. I get that. But, the most important ability is availability. And, Rick, if he's not there, like, what does this Buccaneers team do next to a guy like Lavonte David, where we know, the numbers are counting down to how many games he's going to be, playing with the Bucs? Yeah,
it's a position that's a concern. They don't have a lot of depth. And you do worry about Lavonte David, who has, beaten Father Time to this point, but it is undefeated. And he'll be, 35 years old when this, if he's not already, when the season starts, and that's as old as Derek Brooks when he quit. So Lavonte makes up for maybe what he's lost in foot speed with just his instincts and his ability to know where to be. I think, they knew that Servassier had a shoulder coming out of college. It wound up getting him. He had to have surgery on it. I think if he's better and he's healthy, anything can happen, but they're pretty comfortable with him. But then they went out and, essentially made a trade with KJ Britt and the veteran from Miami that,
Walker,
exactly. Walker Jr. And you've got a guy that's played a lot of football. He's 29 years old. I think where you fall into the trap and where it gets dicey is if you lose a starter and you go to somebody who hasn't played, right? They did kind of that with Josh Hayes at corner last year, right? It just doesn't work out. You want to be in a position where you have veterans on the field that you at least know you can get through a game. He's not going to hurt you. He's going to be where he needs to be. He's going to make plays. Played a lot of football. He's 29 years old. So I think they've helped themselves from a backup situation, but there's no question that they're counting heavily on having, Levante back. And look, you got to have Voss. Like, you have to have him cover receivers and do all that. That's a big hole in this team. There's no way around that. They didn't address it in the draft per se. I know they got some free agents in camp they like, but if there's a breakdown on this defense, it's going to be right there in the middle.
Rick, let everybody know when they can hear you, where they can read you. I know we've been telling everybody.
TampaBay.com, Tampa Bay Times. You guys should know that. And then I've been doing something with Neil Hardman on ESPN Tampa Bay, which is 11:50 a.m. And you can look up the FM component. But we're on from 9 to 10 a.m. Just talking little Tampa Bay sports, and I don't have enough to do, Jay, so I gotta stay busy.
Sports Day Tampa Bay, a father and a husband and a great all-around guy. Again, I stress it to everybody out there, man. Support local. Our friends at the Tampa Bay Times, man. Get a subscription for you, your friends. Every little bit helps. Everybody always talks about the coverage of Tampa Bay sports and what we can do to help. There it is right there. Subscribe to the Tampa Bay Times today. Rick, always a pleasure, man. I know you're a busy man. Thank you, pal. Talk soon.
Appreciate you, brother. See you.
You got it, man.